Today we're going to be looking at a Smith & Wesson Model 10-7 38 Special Revolver. This video will be in 3 parts. The first part will be a new acquisition inspection. The second part will be disassembly of the complete revolver. And the third video will be a basic trigger job and reassembly. The first step, always, every time, is to make sure that the gun is empty. You will see me do this many times throughout the video. It is not a bit or a running joke that I'm doing. This is serious. This is real. This is how you keep yourself and the people around you safe. You check it and check it and check it again. The next step is to make sure that where you are, there is no ammo. Take it out of the room where you're working. Just do it. All right, so let's begin. We check to make sure that it's empty. And as we're doing that, I'm testing how easily the cylinder opens. And this one does not. This one actually will get stuck. Well, not stuck, but it will stay in position. And it's not supposed to do that. So, potential issues. There could be gunk, dried oil, who knows, built up down in here. Or it could be that somewhere along the way, these 2 screws got swapped. The screw that goes in this hole is fitted to the yoke. And it's very easy to get these 2 mixed up. That can cause that difficult to open issue. So we will write that down on our pad. Notepad and pencil. Important thing to have with you as you do this. Next, does the cylinder spin freely? It does, mostly. So that's not bad. How do the chambers look inside? These look pretty clean. You can see that there is a little bit of a ring in there. That's probably built up lead and powder fouling, but I don't see any rust. That's a good thing. How does the ejector feel? It's not binding. It's smooth. It returns on its own. That's a good thing. Also, while you're checking to see how it opens, check to see how it closes. Locks into place well. That's good. Let's look here. How is the alignment of the ejector rod and the front latch? This one looks pretty good. Sometimes it'll feel like there's a hitch right here as you move the cylinder latch. Usually the hitch isn't here. It's up here because there's a pin that runs all the way through the center of the gun, oddly enough called the center pin. And as you push on the latch, that moves the bolt inside. We'll see that later. That pushes on the center pin, and that pushes on the front latch. You can see this little piece right here moving. When you push on the thumb piece, this piece right here moves. That pushes on this piece. Notice we've got some kind of munged up oil right there. This piece runs all the way through and comes to here. If I push on it just right, you can see it approaching the end of the ejector. And as that piece, the center pin, completes its travel, this one is nice and stiff, there we go. As it completes its travel, it should come flush or slightly out of the end of the ejector rod. That engages the front latch, and looks like we might have a little bit of, maybe just a tiny bit of rust there. Might be a reflection, we'll check that later. That engages with the front latch, pushes it forward, and allows everything to release. So, if it feels like, boy, that is stiff. If it feels like there's a hitch here, look here. Lubricate that. Quite often that'll take care of the problem. Another thing we want to look for is there an appropriate amount of gap, let me try to get the angle right, here between the ejector rod and that front latch. Sometimes things will be difficult to open. There we go. Sometimes things will be difficult to open, and it's because the ejector rod has unscrewed and is pushing against this front latch, and there isn't this gap right here that I'm pointing at. If that gap is not there and the gun's hard to open, that's a hint. Next, let's look at the bore. Now, I have a spiffy little light reflecting thing that I use for that. Try it, there we go. Another way you can do this is to just take your fingernail or your thumbnail and put it inside, and you can get a good idea of what the bore looks like. In our case, we're a little dirty, but I don't see any big pits. I don't see any gouges. The rifling looks good. I think we're in good shape. Difficult to close. What else can we look at? We look at the overall condition of the bluing. Places where the blue will wear first are the sides of the cylinder, the edge of the muzzle, and where your hand naturally falls. Sometimes you'll have some that have a big wear mark across here from being in a holster. If it's an ex-cop gun, this stock panel will be chewed to hell, because in a holster, if you're right-handed, this is the one that bangs on everything. Our stocks look good, our bluing looks good. If you're worried about whether or not it's been re-blued, take a look at how clear the markings are and look for kind of a softness around the outside of the marking. Notice that the words Smith and Wesson here, I'm trying to get this into the frame. There we go. Notice that the letters actually look a little soft, I guess is the best word to use, compared to how crisp this is. So our barrel may have been just buffed a little bit more. Same thing on this side. Our 38 Smith & Wesson Special cartridge marking looks a little bit softer than the Made in USA markings. Another hint, how sharp is the edge around the screw holes in the side plate? If I get the light just right, you can see that this one looks a little bit dished right there. This one looks pretty good. I'm going to say that this gun has probably been re-blued. It has been opened up. If you look right here on the side plate, there's a little, almost like a flap that's been created in the metal. That's from someone taking the side plate off by grabbing it and pulling, and it creates that. What else can we look at? Our color case hardening on the trigger is still present. Oh, hey, look. We found rust. There's some rust here on the hammer. We'll have to take care of that. This side looks pretty good. Trigger return feels a little sticky. So let's take a look at our trigger. We'll make sure that we're empty again. I know it hasn't even been out of my hands, but check it. Just get in the habit. So to check our trigger, we need some tools. There's a couple of components to the trigger pull that we need to measure. The first is the hammer tension. How much pressure is on the hammer. To measure that, you use the fish scale type of trigger pull gauge. You can do it with the other type. It's easier with this one. So the technique, make sure it's empty. Cock it. Secure the hammer with your thumb and pull the trigger. Hold the trigger back. Now the gun is in this state. The hammer can move freely. Take the rod from your fish scale, and you want to put it right here at this notch. Not at that notch, this one, closer to the top. You just hook it right there, let the hammer down gently. Now that rod is just kind of stuck there. You're still holding the trigger. I'll have to move the gun itself out of the frame, but what I'm going to do is to hook the scale to the rod, still holding onto the trigger, and I'm going to measure how much it takes to make the hammer move. You can see we're at the spot right there where it just kind of wants to move. Now, how much is that? This is where we change what's in the frame. That point of movement almost maxes out my scale. It's about 70 ounces. That's a lot. We can safely take this thing down quite a bit on the hammer tension. I've experimented with different hammer tensions. On a 38 in a K-frame, I found that 48 ounces will pretty much reliably ignite any primer. If you get down to 40 or 42, then you really have to use federal primers. You start getting into trouble with CCI primers at around 40 or 42. So I keep them at 48. That way, anything I put into it will work fine. So we'll make a note of that we had 72 ounces of hammer tension. So now we're done with that tool. We'll put it aside. This is an old one that I got from RCBS long ago. This is probably 40 years old. Yes, I put my tools back in the drawer after I use them. I don't end up with a big pile here on the bench. This is a different style of trigger pull gauge. This one is from Lyman. I got this from Brownells. And what this does is it will set a marker at the point that you stop pulling. So it's much easier to refer to later than the fish scale style. So we'll reset this guy back to 0. Yep, we're still empty. Now, I put my finger here as I do this, not to assist, not to fake how the trigger pull comes out. It's there as a guide, because I've found that where you put the end of the scale on the trigger changes the reading that you get, and I want consistency. So my finger is just there as a guide. I'm not actually exerting any pressure, it's just guiding the scale. So we're going to pull through, and we got 11 pounds. Ew, that's a heck of a trigger pull. Now we need to do all 6. Excuse me. Need to do all 6, because if the trigger pull changes as you go around, that's an indication that you may have a rotation issue. That one was only 10. That one was just over 9. See what I mean? We have some differences. 9.5. 9. That's unfortunate. I don't really want to redo the rest of the video to take that out, but oh well. And here we are at just over 9 again. I'm noticing that the more I pull it, the better the trigger pull gets. So that's an indication that there's gunk in there. Let's try our single action pull. Again, guiding with the finger. Wow, that was heavy. 6 pounds. Ew. Let's try another one. Guiding with the finger. £6 again. £7. God, this is horrible. £7. I think that was 4. Number 5. Now number 5 went to £5. Come on, get in the right place. And now we're back to 6. So we've got some significant variations in the trigger pull. That tells me really that, combined with this not opening smoothly, that there's probably 40 years of dried Glock inside of here. What else can we check? How's the trigger return feel? It's a little gummy. And there's a hitch right there. So that could use some help. I think really all we have here is a whole lot of ugliness built up inside. So let's take it apart. Let's clean it and see what we get.